In this video, we will show you how to replace your driver's side CV axle assembly on this Nissan Altima. Let's get into it. The first thing we need to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheels off the ground with the suspension hanging. Once you've done that, we'll continue on to removing all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. If you have a hubcap on here, you can tug this out of place. Just be careful for any pinch points. Now that we have the wheel out of the way, let's have a look in the center area here. We are going to have to remove the axle nut. Generally on this, there should be a locking cotter pin, locking this nut in place. Go ahead and remove that and set it aside for recycling. After that, we'll remove the lock from around this area. Use your 32mm socket to remove the axle nut. If you're using a hand tool of some sort and you found that this wanted to spin, you could bring it closer to the ground, put a bar across this area diagonally to hold it from spinning, or have a second person just go ahead and step on the brake. Continue on with a hammer and punch. Directly in the center of the axle, we're going to give this a couple bonks to try to break this free from the wheel bearing. Once you have movement in this area, you can continue. Now let's have a look along the back side of the rotor. We're going to be looking for where the outer tie rod end connects to the steering knuckle. Remove the locking cotter pin and then your 19mm mounting nut. When you remove that, you'll find that it also had a washer. Now we can start the nut on there, just a couple threads. Now we'll use a hammer, cause some vibration, and that should break this free. When doing so, be extremely careful not to cause any damage to the outer tie rod end. Set this aside. Moving along from there, we'll be separating the lower ball joint from the lower aspect of the steering knuckle. This is found just underneath your axle. Now to do this, you're going to find that you have an 18mm headed bolt that makes its way through from the rear towards the front. We'll use an 18mm on both sides of this. Just get this to break free. We'll continue on with a hammer and punch, drive this straight through. We'll use some penetrant in this area. Now we'll be using a chisel and a hammer. We have to separate this area in between the two portions of the steering knuckle. When you're doing so, you only want to separate it enough that we can start bringing the ball joint down and through here. The stud makes its way up through the center. We don't want to continue pressing it in too far and end up cracking anything. Now we can start separating the ball joint from the knuckle. When doing so, there's a couple different ways of doing so. You can use a pickle fork and come right inside this area, but generally you could cause damage to the knuckle or the ball joint. Otherwise, you could find a hook like this, slide that right over that lower control arm. Now we'll make our way through this slot, up against the control arm, and gently start pulling this down and out of place. With that separated, carefully swing the knuckle out of the way. Now that we have that separated, we'll continue pulling on the knuckle. While doing so, we want to try to remove the axle from the back side of the wheel bearing here. Be careful for any pinch points. Now we'll make our way underneath the subframe. You'll find that you have a small skid plate that makes its way along the subframe towards the front. We have to dislodge the rear aspect of this by removing 2 push clips from the area. To remove the push clips, you can generally use a small screwdriver or even a trim tool. Separate the center from the outer portion, and that should unlock it. With it unlocked, you should be able to remove the entire thing from the area and give it a quick inspection. We'll move along to the second push clip here, removing the center first, dislodging that. At this point, we'll make our way up into this area. With that skid plate dislodged, we'll make our way up to where the axle connects to the transmission using a pry bar, gently prying these two areas apart. Be careful with the axle so it doesn't fall out and potentially hurt you. Keep in mind there could be transmission fluid, so have a collection receptacle handy. Take hold of the axle and remove it from the vehicle. There it is, friend. Now that we have the axle out of the transmission, the next step is to clean and inspect the seal here. Carefully use a clean rag and just give it a nice wipe. Once you've done that, let's just make sure that it is soft and pliable and it's not torn, worn, or damaged in any way. Assuming this looks good, let's prepare for installation. We'll carefully bring this into place, aligning the shaft with the hole going into the transmission. Being careful not to damage the seal, we'll continue pressing this in. As you're pressing it in, try wiggling a little left and right. You should feel it want to fit in. Once it's in the grooves, we'll continue on by giving this a loving bonk inward towards the transmission. We don't want to cause any damage to the axle or, of course, the transmission, but we do need to have this seated. Let's use a rubber mallet for this so we don't cause any damage. Now, as I was driving that in, I could feel it move in towards the transmission, and then I heard an audible difference. Take hold of this inboard side here without pulling the boot out of place, and try to remove the axle from the transmission. Assuming it's locked in, we can continue on. Let's continue on with some anti-seize along the splined area of the axle. Take hold of the axle. We'll start putting this area into the backside of the wheel bearing. To do this, we'll be pulling away on the knuckle a little bit so we can swing this in. Once you have this portion of the axle going into the bearing, we also have to pull down on the control arm so we can bring that ball joint stud through the bottom of the knuckle. Now let's pry down on this lower control arm so we can start sliding the ball joint stud into the bottom of the knuckle. While doing so, we want to pay attention to the axle and make sure that it is sliding into the backside of the wheel bearing. There we are. We'll just have a peek up inside this area, make sure that it's completely seated. We can remove this. With that ball joint pressed into place, we'll continue on with our mounting bolt. Typically, it is a good idea to replace this bolt. If you are not replacing it, you also should use some blue thread locker. We'll start this through, start it in position, and then torque it to 72 foot-pounds. We'll install the outer tie rod end to the steering knuckle. Install the washer. We'll start the nut on there, snug it up, torque it to 25 foot-pounds. We'll install the locking cotter pin. Just want to slide that straight on through the stud and peen it over. Let's clean the transmission. It's time to reattach the shield. We have our two push pins that are holding this together. We'll press in the outer portion first, lock it in by pressing in the center. Move along to the next one up here. Now it's time to reinstall the axle nut. We'll take this and bottom it out against the wheel bearing. You never want to use an impact tool on this because you could cause damage to your wheel bearing. We'll just make sure this is snug and then we'll get it a little closer to the ground so we can torque it. Now let's torque this to 135 foot-pounds. You'll find that I have a pry bar coming diagonally down through this area, down to the ground to hold this in place. Now we can torque this. The next thing we'll do is put on our lock here. When we put this in position, we're trying to align some of the castled holes here with the hole that goes through the center of the axle. Just spin it as needed until something lines up. Pretty close to perfect here. Let's put in our locking cotter pin. We'll reinstall the wheel, start on all 5 of our 21mm lug nuts and bottom them out. With the wheel safely back down on the ground, let's torque these in a crisscross manner. torqued. Okay, friend, we've got our vehicle back together. At this point, hop in it, take it for a road test, listen for funny noises, and get yourself safely down to your local alignment shop. Now, don't forget to order all your parts from 1AAuto.com. Like, comment, and subscribe. Thanks for watching.